All right, 9 o'clock here on this Wednesday night, February 1st. Thank you so much for being with us as we look back at what happened in the courtroom today in the Alex Murdaugh double murder trial. The disgraced attorney is accused of shooting and killing his wife Maggie and son Paul in June of 2021. After we go over what happened in court today, we're going to be joined by two criminal defense attorneys for their take on the latest developments in Walterboro. Now, the first part of the testimony today centered on the cell phones of the victims and the defendant. One of the major revelations today was a video that prosecutors say was taken with Paul Murdaugh's phone on the night of the shooting deaths. SLED agent Britt Dove testifying that the video was recorded around 8:45 in the evening. It appears the video was recorded inside a dog kennel area where Paul is trying to get video of a dog. There are three voices on that video. Here's a clip where they can each be heard.
Hey, he's got a bird in his mouth.
Bubba. Hey, Bubba.
That's a guinea.
This is a chicken.
Come here, Bubba.
Come here, Cash.
Come here, Bubba.
Cash. Quit. Get back. Get back.
Well, one of Paul Murdaugh's best friends, Rogan Gibson, testified today saying he's sure that Alex Murdaugh's voice can be heard on that videotape. Gibson told prosecutors that he was close with the Murdaughs, considering them a second family. Gibson and Paul texted each other and spoke on the phone about Gibson's dog on the night of the murders. Phone records show that Paul called Gibson at 8:40 from the dog kennel. 4 minutes later, Paul attempted a FaceTime call with Gibson to show him a possible issue with the dog's tail. After that call failed, Gibson was waiting for Paul to send him the video of the dog. He never got that video, but has since watched it with police. Here is his response after the video was played in court today.
He favored us back in November 2022.
It is.
Where's that video taken?
At the kennels.
You recognize your dog?
I do.
You recognize Paul's voice?
Yes, sir.
You recognize Maggie's voice?
Yes, sir.
You recognize Alex's voice?
Yes, sir.
100%?
Yes, sir.
Can you point out Alex Murdaugh, the person whose voice you recognize in this video in this courtroom, please?
Sitting right there in the gray jacket.
Please let the record reflect he's identified the defendant.
Well, this would differ from what Alex Murdaugh has told investigators. He told them he was at the house napping, not at the dog kennel with his son and wife when they were shot to death. Instead, Alex Murdaugh hinted to investigators that his son's boating accident a few years ago in which a woman died was perhaps the reason for the murders. Under cross-examination, Gibson was asked if Paul Murdaugh was ever confronted about that in public. Take a listen.
Did Paul receive any threats or harassments that you knew about as a result of that boating accident?
None that I thought was real serious. I mean, he mentioned it that, you know, he'd get people comment about it, but nothing that I thought was real serious.
Did he, would people just mouth off to him when he went out bars or just with his friends?
Yes, sir. He had mentioned that.
But was it anything that you thought was serious in nature?
No, and a lot of times I wasn't there when that happened, so I didn't think it was that serious.
Another friend of Paul Murdaugh's testifying today. During Will Loving's testimony, prosecutors again played Paul Murdaugh's video from that dog kennel. Loving said he was 100% certain that Alex Murdaugh's voice can be heard on the video. And during his questioning, Alex Murdaugh's legal financial troubles were brought up for the first time during the trial, which led to objections from defense attorneys.
Did you know anything about what his bank account balances were?
No, sir, I did not.
Did you know anything about the debt that he was carrying? Do you know anything about that?
No, sir.
Did you know the specific things that were going on in the boat case the week that Paul and Maggie were murdered?
No, sir.
Do you know anything about civil discovery and how it can expose financial information?
No, sir.
Do you know anything at all about him being confronted on June 7th, 2021 about...
Object.
You have the question.
Did you know anything about him being confronted on the morning of June 7th, 2021, about $792,000 of missing fees from his law firm?
Objection, Your Honor. It's totally improper.
Objection is overruled.
Did you know anything about that?
No, I did not.
You know any of the facts of those things that I just asked you about?
No, sir.
And Judge Newman is expected to further address what financial matters will be allowed to be mentioned. That is expected sometime tomorrow. Loving also testifying that the last he heard from Paul Murdaugh was a Snapchat video that he received just before 8 o'clock on the night of the slayings. He said the clip shows Alec and Paul looking at trees on their property. Our Sam Perez was in the courtroom. She joins us tonight with a closer look at today's testimony.
Dove was able to take a look at texting patterns from all three Murdaughs. He saw that Paul was texting back and forth with friends, reading and receiving messages within seconds. At 8:49 p.m., Dove testified Paul's phone was at 2%. At 10:34 p.m., his phone died. The prosecution asked Dove about the time that battery lasted.
About an hour and 35 minutes.
If a phone that is at 2% is used heavily, how long approximately would you expect that phone to last before it dies?
If it's being used heavily, text messaging, looking at videos, things of that nature that are going to put more strain on the battery, I would expect it to go to the point of being dead. I would imagine, and just kind of ballparking because I haven't done testing on this, but I would say 10 to 15 minutes max.
The prosecution has had Dove walk through the text messages on both Maggie and Alex's phones on the night of the murders. He also explained about the motion detected on each. According to Dove, Alex's phone showed steps taken up until 8:09 p.m. After that, no motion is recorded for about an hour until it records 283 steps between 9:02 and 9:06 p.m.
All right, and we are now being joined by two criminal defense attorneys, Luke and Brian Sheely. Guys, thank you for your time this evening to talk about this. Luke, we spoke with you the other night. I'm going to give your brother Brian a chance to weigh in first here. Some of the big testimony today contradicting what Alex Murdaugh told investigators. That video that was played at the dog kennel with Gibson testifying he heard Murdaugh's voice on that tape. How damning is that for the defense?
Absolutely. I mean, that was a critical point for the state, for striking points here and kind of getting ahead of any alibi with Alex Murdaugh kind of previously telling law enforcement that he was asleep at that time and never down the kennels. Obviously, the identification of his voice on that video was damaging. Similarly, though, that witness was very familiar with the family. He was very familiar with Alex Murdaugh, and he kind of struck an emotional tone there that sort of almost gave some good character to the defense. So it cut both ways in that it limited any potential alibi, but also kind of humanized the first witness to actually humanize Alex Murdaugh from the stand.
Over the last several days, it appears that the defense doing their job, trying to poke holes in the prosecution's case. But this is a family friend who considered himself a member of the family, Luke. And he's on the witness stand today saying he's 100% positive that he hears Alex Murdaugh on that tape.
That's a picture of a 300.
Right, it really does kind of blow out of the water the idea that Mr. Murdaugh is napping at the house and never went down the kennels, which on the one hand as a criminal defense lawyer, that's why even if the defendant is a lawyer himself, you might want to not talk to police in the wake of something like this because you can see how it can come to bite you down the road. But it does narrow the timeline. It allows them to say, hey, you weren't entirely truthful with us, or either you've got some serious explaining to do.
Right. All right. So a lot of talk about cell phone usage from the victims' phones and Alex Murdaugh's phones, particularly that of Maggie's, her phone found about a half-mile away. Who knew that you could collect so much information off of a cell phone, Brian?
Right. They're really little secret spies in our pocket. They know where we walk. They know when we pick them up. They know what we text. They know who we call. So there's a lot of critical information that's always going to be available potentially for law enforcement investigating a crime.
And in this case, do you think the prosecution is doing a good job connecting Alex Murdaugh to the murder scene by using the cell phone information?
And I'm gonna need to know
Well, I'll say yes until the cross-examined today by Jim Griffin, because really with that very well-qualified expert, Mr. Dove, what he got to do, well, actually it was Mr. Barber, comparing the two timelines, it did show that although the state's theory is that Mr. Murdaugh killed his wife and son and then had her phone and tried to get rid of it, at the same time that that's supposed to be happening, Mr. Murdaugh's phone is moving by steps while hers is not doing anything. He cranks up his car and then calls that phone, and only then does his wife's phone change portrait orientation.
Right.
And so it really allowed them to float the theory that, well, you can't have one person, Mr. Murdaugh presumably, with two phones if only one is registering steps and the other one isn't. So they were able to float the idea that the real assailant freaked out and then threw away her phone as maybe he was getting away. So that was fascinating for us.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think toward the end of the day today, we were getting into the financial crimes that he is accused of, a possible motive in this case being money, financial trouble that he was in.
Yes, this is the
prosecution seems to be taking it step by step, trying to connect Murdaugh to the scene today, and now they're entering into that possible motive, Brian, of he needed money.
Absolutely, and that was a critical blow for the prosecution to land. Heavily contested pretrial litigation, heavily contested right before that witness took the stand. And Judge Newman really likes to kind of let it play out and decide, as it's happening. And so, yeah, that was objected to. However, it did come in. The witness didn't have any information about that, but the state was able to ring that bell for the first time, and I'm sure that will be addressed tomorrow.
All right, so without any murder weapons and without any blood spatter on Alex Murdaugh, without any gunpowder residue on his hands, do you guys think the prosecution has considered all of that, trying to connect him to the crime scene, and now as we move into the next phase of this trial, a possible motive for what he did? Do they have a good case without all that other hard evidence, so to say?
It's a good case, but it's a circumstantial case. So it allows them to really infer that who else could have done it, but they don't have that blow that they can really land to make sure they get a conviction. So that's why they really want to get into those financial crimes, but it's on a knife's edge. I mean, you got to think about due process, whether Mr. Murdaugh's going to get a fair trial. And usually when there's certain rules at play, you can't just get into other bad crimes, wrongs, or acts and say he's a bad guy there, therefore jury, we think he's a bad guy now. There really needs to be a nexus to show that motive. And I'd be curious. What I'd heard in pretrial publicity was that it was going to be a distraction so that people wouldn't look at his financial motives. But I would want to see more if I was a judge. Of course, I'm not the judge. Judge Newman is. I'd want to see some type of insurance policy evidence or some kind of direct, huge financial benefit, because by all accounts, he was in love with his wife and loved his firstborn son. So it would seem to take a lot to commit this.
Obviously, this has attracted a whole lot of attention, not only here in South Carolina, but across the country. And we've had a chance to talk to some people. I know some people who are following this trial, and they tell me, well, 1 minute, I think the state is doing a good job of proving their case. The next minute, the defense is doing this. And so it's kind of like blows back and forth. I'm just curious as to both of you, how do you think the jury is feeling right now as they hear all of this going back and forth?
Well, the longer the investigation, the bigger the trial, the longer the actual trial itself with the evidence. And the jury is really wanting to hear from not so much expert witnesses, they want to hear from people that have knowledge of the matter. And certainly they're going to want to hear from Alex Murdaugh. The defense has introduced exhibits in this case. That means they're going to put on a case, and he is certainly going to testify. And I just know the jury is eager to see, what he has to say for himself.
What's your take? What do you think that's going through the jurors'
Well, that's a
mind
bold
right
prediction
now?
about whether he will. I mean, he might, but they have put in evidence, which means they don't get last closing. They don't get the final word to the jury. But I think a jury at times is overwhelmed with technical data, but I think today they've been really getting some of the stuff that they wanted to see, which was that Snapchat video. They wanted to see people who were close to that family identify Mr. Murdaugh. but also in the same vein say, I have no idea. He loves them. I couldn't imagine any reason why he would want to hurt them. So I think things are heating up. I think they'll continue to heat up, and expect tomorrow mistrial motion, probably right out the gate if Judge Newman allows all this financial crime evidence.
Some observers of this trial saying that the state attorney general walked into the courtroom yesterday, really just sort of sat and observed, but today, according to several observers, he was taking a more hands-on approach to this case. He was like looking at notes, he was writing things down, passing notes. Surprising that the state attorney general would be so involved in this.
Not surprising. He would want to be the face of this case. This is a huge case for the state of South Carolina and for the country, and so he would want to be involved at the table and helping his team of lawyers.
So what's left here? I guess, as we mentioned at the end of the session today, they were bringing up the possible financial crimes that he's accused of. So after they establish some sort of motive, is there anything else left for the state to try and present to the jury?
Oh yeah, I mean, we still have the firearms expert who I'm desperate to hear from, and I've been thinking about a lot as it's the real crime scene puzzle. We haven't heard from any pathologist yet about cause of death. I mean, it's certainly obvious how they died, but sometimes the true mechanisms of the injury can be very informative to a jury. So we're probably going to hear from maybe a lead investigator to really tie it up, wrap it up. So I think we still have at least certainly through this week for the state.
Right. Doesn't sound like the state's going to be wrapping up by the end of the week, though, does it, Brian?
No, not at all.
Yes, that's one of them.
All right. So Brian, Luke, Sheely, guys, criminal defense attorneys, we thank you for your insight on all of this. You guys bring a unique perspective to it that folks like me cannot bring. You guys have seen what's going on in the courtroom, and we appreciate your opinions on what's been taking place.
Thanks for having us.
All right, and as we continue to follow what's going on in the Colleton County Courthouse, you can watch full coverage. You can watch the trial beginning tomorrow morning at 9:30. That's when testimony will get back underway. You can watch on WLTX Plus. You can watch on our YouTube channel, which, by the way, has been very, very busy. Tens of thousands of you logging on there. We thank you so very much. You can also watch on WLTX.com. So again, we'll be back on the air tomorrow with more updates on the Alex Murdaugh double murder trial.